Now let us get into a very important tool in AWS, which is nothing but S3. S3 stands for Simple Storage Service. I have been saying from the beginning that we create the cluster, process the data, and terminate the cluster. As we have to create and terminate the cluster on regular basis, what happens to the data that is processed, or where the data will come from to process, and where the data go post-processing after cluster is terminated. This is the question that rises very common, and S3 is one of the solutions which you can use to persist the data beyond the scope of the cluster. Okay, again, S3 stands for Simple Storage Service. You can go to S3 either by expanding these all services and then go to storage, or you can also expand these services, go to storage, and choose S3 from here. You will have an account associated with your AWS Web Console for S3, and you can have as many buckets you want. And the way you can create bucket is by clicking on this create bucket, and the bucket name which you give here has to be unique across the AWS in this region. My region is US East 2. In this region, my bucket name has to be unique. So here I am giving something called ITVersity demo as the bucket name and clicking on next. If the bucket is available, it will go to the next screen, otherwise it will not. You don't need to worry too much about versioning, tags, object level logging, server access logging at this time. You can explore that in future whenever it is required. For now, we will click on next to go to the next window. Here you can see what kind of access should be given to whom. So all the objects in this bucket for owner will be given with read and write permissions. You can also add another account and you can grant access to that account so that others outside your account can also access the files in AWS S3. You can also manage public permissions. You can see do not grant public read access to this bucket by default. But if you want to give access to the public on your AWS account, especially the read access, you can choose grant public access, grant public read access to this bucket. Anyway, I will keep it private. The reason why we typically use is you might often see that people share the files through S3 buckets, and by making it public, you can share the files to the public. And also you can actually manage system permissions on S3. If you want to grant AWS S3 log delivery group write access to this bucket, you can do so that some of your applications can persist log files also in this location. I will keep this one, do not grant, and then you can click on next, and then you can preview what all selections you made. So ITVersity demo is my bucket name, which will be created in US East region. Versioning is disabled, server access logging is disabled, tagging is disabled, object level logging is disabled, and default encryption is not configured. And then permissions, I haven't given any permission to any other user, and public permissions and system permissions are disabled. And create bucket. It will create the bucket for you. Bucket is nothing but a higher level directory, and if you want to have any data in S3, you can now copy into the bucket and you can make them accessible for you, and we will see that later. Now, as we already set up AWS command line interface, you can also access these buckets and all other stuff related to S3 and many other things on AWS using command line also. So here I am launching Cygwin and running AWS S3 ls and hit enter. It is showing the bucket which is just created, and if you look at that bucket, there is no files in them, so it will not return anything. Similarly, if you look at AWS help, It will give all the commands and subcommands that are available for you, and you can see that you can maintain S3 with this, you can maintain EC2 instances with this, you can do whatever you do on AWS console using AWS command line interface. So in case if you want to deal with EC2 instances, you can see here, there is EC2 here. Similarly, we are talking about S3. So there are S3 related commands and we have already validated. So over a period of time, it is better for you to understand AWS command line interface as much as possible so that you use appropriate commands for your purpose in running the resources on AWS in much more reliable and cost effective manner.